In our first discussion about the law of the land, we talked about how the discovery and granting of new rights by the courts have so undermined the Constitution. But I'll tell you what's just as damaging, if not more so, to your life and mine. And that's congressional abuse of the Constitution's Commerce Clause. Now, the Commerce Clause states simply, Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states. But in the last 60 years or so, this simple clause has been abused in the most outrageous fashion. This abuse dates back to a Supreme Court decision in 1942 when the court upheld a law that prevented a farmer in Ohio from growing more wheat than the federal government decided he and other farmers should be allowed to grow. That started us down a slippery slope that culminated in the health care bill of 2010. When the Congress used the Commerce Clause to force all of us to buy private health care plans under threat of IRS penalties. Now, listen to what the majority wrote in 1990 in a decision rejecting Congress's creative use of the Commerce Clause. It said, and I quote, "If we were to accept the government's arguments, we are hard-pressed to posit any activity by an individual that Congress is without power to regulate." Unfortunately, this was perhaps the only instance when the Supreme Court actually said no to Congress using the Commerce Clause in ways the founders never intended. I'm frightened by this. You should be frightened by this because it means there's almost nothing the federal government won't try to do using the Commerce Clause as justification. This is an outrageous corruption of probably the greatest document ever written. We as citizens need to learn or relearn the Constitution so we can recognize these abuses and demand that judges and legislators obey the law of the land the same as citizens. America has often been threatened from outside. We fought a war for independence and 2 world wars and were attacked on our own homeland less than a decade ago. But our freedom has rarely, if ever, been as threatened from inside as it is today. So, pick up a Constitution and read it. Read about how it's governed our affairs for over 200 years. Part of what you'll discover is that this law of the land was at the heart of transforming America from a non-entity at its founding into the world's greatest superpower and a bastion of freedom like the world has never seen. But it loses its power when it's abused or ignored by the people who write and interpret our laws. We are one generation away from a federal government so large and so willing to abuse its constitutional authority that we'll hardly recognize the country we grew up in. Or we are one generation away from a rebirth of the type of freedom for which our founders laid the groundwork, driven by citizens like you who are constitutionally educated, engaged, and demanding that its lawmakers honor our Constitution.